So, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the Temple City regular meeting on April 6th to order. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order issued by the Governor Newsom on March 17th, 2020, City is allowed to hold City Council meetings via teleconferencing, and members of the public can observe and address the meeting telephonically or electronically. To listen to the meeting telephonically, please call 1-872-240-3212, access code 574-737-373, or through the city's live webcast on YouTube on Network TC. So I would like to call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez?
Here.
Councilmember Mann?
Here.
Councilmember Vizcarra?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist? Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist?
We can see her saying yes, but there's some sound issues here.
Mayor Yu?
I'm here. I also want to read that for those who want to call in for public comments and other matters that we will consider tonight, your audio will be unmuted during public comment, and when public comment is open during agendized item discussion. You can also email your request to speak to cityclerk@templecity.us right now and indicate on the subject line the item you wish to provide comment. At this time, welcome Pastor Jim Walden with First Baptist Church, located at 6019 South Baldwin. He will provide invocation. Pastor Walden, thank you.
Yes. Sure, and thank you so much for this privilege. And let's pray. Father, on this gorgeous night, we thank you for the privilege to live here, and we look to you, thanking you for how you love us and you continue to protect us and carry us through these challenging days. Thank you so much for the City Council, for Mayor Yu and all the council members. And Lord, we ask for their continued protection and wisdom, because you're the one who raises up great leadership. And so we ask that you would preside over this time. God, you continue to bless America, and we look forward to what you're going to do as we look to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
So at this time, please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of
America and to the
and
republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
under God,
indivisible, liberty and justice
with
for
liberty
all.
and justice for all.
All right. Next item is ceremonial matters, and we have one presentation which is on Arbor Day proclamation. So unlike other years where we'll present a proclamation to the Parks and Rec director, I'll just read the proclamation tonight. Arbor Day, which translates to tree day from the Latin origin of the word arbor, is a celebration of the planting, upkeep, and preservation of trees. Trees can reduce the erosion of topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and the cooling cost, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-saving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. Trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our home, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And trees in our city increase property values enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. I, Vincent Yu, Mayor of City of Temple City, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 30th, 2021 as Arbor Day in the city of Temple City. I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support the efforts to protect our urban forests, and urge all citizens to plant trees to promote the well-being of this and future generations. All right, with that, I'll move on to the next item, which is public comments on items not listed on the agenda. The City Council will now hear public comments regarding items not listed on the agenda. The procedure to address the City Council is highlighted on the first page of our agenda. The section is limited to 30 minutes total. For those calling in, your audio will now be unmuted. Please state your name so you can be added to the speakers list. To avoid callers from speaking over each other, we will call your name to speak. You can also email your request to speak to City Clerk at Temple City, US right now, and indicate on the subject line the item you wish to provide comment. Madam City Clerk, are there any callers or emails?
Mayor Yu, there are no public callers and there are no email requests to speak.
So with that, I will close public comment. We'll move on to item 7, consent calendar. All consent calendar items may be approved in a single motion as recommended unless we move for further discussion. Any member of the City Council or anyone want to remove item for discussion?
Mayor Yu, I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion and second. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Mann?
Yes.
Councilmember Viscara?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist?
It seems as though we're still having some audio issues that we're trying to resolve, Mayor Yu. It should take just a minute or two to resolve for Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist.
Okay, I think we can move ahead.
Mayor Yu?
Yes. So hopefully, Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist can join us with audio very soon.
Why don't you just ask her to nod her head up and down?
Well, on my screen, she's frozen as well.
Is she? Okay.
Yeah, at least on my screen, I have poor video tonight. Can you guys see her okay?
Maybe you can send one of your videos to her.
She's paused on my screen, the video.
Yeah, she's frozen on my screen as well. So maybe she needs to re-log in. So, Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist, if you can hear this, please maybe log back on again or call in.
Staff speaking with her, sir.
Let's maybe pause for just a minute for Mayor Pro Tem to join us.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for calling in. Mayor Pro Tem, could you speak again? Sounds like we still have a little bit of an issue here. Let's pause for another minute just to wait for Mayor Pro Tem to rejoin us. Hello? Mayor Pro Tem? Can you hear us okay? Okay, now you're back on. Can you hear us okay, Mayor Pro Tem? I can see you moving, but cannot hear you. Now you're frozen.
What happened to Councilmember Chavez? Did we lose him?
No, I'm here. I just choose not to be on the screen at this point. I don't want you to see all the faces I'm showing.
Okay. So, Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist is on my phone and she's on speaker.
The problem we're gonna have is we're gonna have an echo.
So the mayor pro tem needs to turn off her speaker on her computer and then either call in, or if she's gonna Peggy's phone, she can do that. But the echo will come if the computer speaker stays on.
That's right.
Is there a call-in number that you can call to join?
Can you hear me?
Forget the video.
Yes.
Yeah, there is a call-in number. If you click on the top right-hand corner, that little gear thing, it actually would, if you click on this selection between the computer and the phone, if you click on the phone one, it would tell you what number to call in. That's why I did.
He's gonna try calling in again.
Okay.
Would suggest to maybe we just want to turn off her video and other and just simply call in. That may help with the connection.
Yeah, sometimes that really would help if you turn on the screen and just call it. Let's give Mayor Pro Tem another minute to call in.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Pro Tem's having some other issues with her phone as well, so she just has to go ahead with the meeting, and she'll try to log in when she can.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you for that. I certainly hate to have her miss our next discussion, which is so important. So let me move the meeting. Next item is public hearing. There is none. Unfinished business, there is none. The next item is new business. Tonight we will be discussing the preliminary site use concepts for 9050 East Las Tunas Drive, which is the old chamber site. So the City Council is requested to review the preliminary space planning concept and study and consider redevelopment options for the city's property at this location. With that, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. City Manager. Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Mayor Yu and members of the council. Before you tonight is kind of an idea of conceptual ideas. And as you know, we've brought in architect David Goodell, who we worked with in the past. David will pop up on the screen in just a minute. And we'll go over some of the ideas he's had related to this site. As you know, the site is situated at 9050 East Las Tunas Drive, kind of an entryway to the city. For the longest time, it was the home of the Chamber of Commerce until the Chamber of Commerce moved to the Civic Center adjacent to City Hall almost about a year and a half ago. During that time as well, as you know, the city entered into a funding agreement with the county library system. And they were looking for a interim site. And they had that interim site moved into in December of 2019, shortly after which COVID hit. So they have been using that site, but not in the same manner that they thought. That lease expires in the end of September. It is likely that the library, and we'll get an update from them soon related to when they will be able to move in, but they are on pace to move in a complete construction in late summer. So that leaves with us a site that will be unused. It is used now for commercial parking. The library uses about 4 spaces right now reserved for its uses, but the remaining parking is used for commercial.
Okay.
Is that you, Mayor Pro Tem? Okay.
I think I saw call number 3 came through, so. And it disappeared.
Are you with us, Mayor Pro Tem? Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mario. So the site will be, in terms of its current temporary use, will cease sometime in the early fall. Next slide, please. So this is a unique site, and it's a unique site for a few reasons. One of them is it's adjacent to the major corridor of the city, Las Tunas. And now the council will receive some of the preliminary concepts for your consideration. And we did this in a manner so that we would come from a really 40,000-foot level and not really spend the time and the resources until you've kind of given us some general ideas of where you would like to go with the site. So it looks like we still have a little bit of issues. Councilmember Sternquist, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, we have a problem with an echo though again, so.
Okay, we need to mute Mayor Pro Tem's
Yeah, just
computer.
go ahead and mute me, and I'll text Brian if there's a positive vote, because now I can't see anybody on either one. So something's going on with probably the internet connection in the house.
Yeah, not enough bandwidth, I don't think. So I think you should mute Cynthia. Yeah. Okay.
Always the challenges. I go through several meetings myself where everybody sees me frozen. It's the challenge of remote meetings for all of us.
Yes.
So
Yeah, please continue, Mr. Cook.
thank you, Mary Yu. Next slide, please. So just before David begins, I want to talk to you about just about some process considerations, and the city attorney may chime in on this as well. When we're talking about the commercial uses of the property, this is not simply kind of a turnkey situation with the commercial use of the property. This would require one of two processes that we would need to go through if this was to turn over into a commercial property, via the fast food restaurant, a restaurant, or any other commercial uses. Because it is public property, we would have to go through a process to make specific findings of economic development benefit. And those are defined in state law as to what those findings are and how that you make those findings. The other process too, there's two paths. The other process would be as well, and with all the issues related to housing, we would have to make a notice of availability of the property to different property developers in the housing world. The Surplus Land Act could possibly need to be exercised as well, but not necessarily. In any case, both processes you would have to go through, you would have to demonstrate what the public and economic development benefit of them are. The CUP process, though, would be no different than any other development. So if you chose one of the concepts for us to explore, and we go through a commercial process for a commercial development use, we would be treated like any other applicant in that process. Whereas with a public use, if the use is still similar in nature generally, and this is a generalization, there would be pretty limited review required. So if you're going to keep it as parking, do some landscaping, or even if you went through a park process, you would still have some limited review. Similar to this though, obviously with some scope difference, the CUP process, we'd be treating it like like any other development. For example, the recently to be opened in the next, hopefully by the end of this year, Primrose Park did go through a CUP process as well for its development. So with that, next slide, please. So with that, I will turn it over to David Goodell to talk to you, to give you some ideas of the site orientation, its uses, and some thoughts as to what those uses could be, and then to get your direction and thoughts afterwards. So with that, I turn it over to David Goodell.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Good evening, Mayor Yu, council members.
Good evening, Mr. Goodell.
The site is located at Sultana and Las Tunas, and that's all we need to say about this first slide, so we could go on. And there's a real nexus of different zones at this site, including the commercial that is pretty much run along in the red, run along from here to east, and then the Crossroads Specific Plan kitty corner. And then this site and the block that it's on is kind of targeted as mixed use medium density. What's interesting about it is that this particular site is not particularly large compared to the entire block of that purple. And so it as you will see, it's a little challenging to look at it as a mixed use high density or medium density, primarily because of the parking. But we'll get there. And then to the south, we have residential R3 that we're adjacent to. Next slide, please. So this is basically kind of a series of character photographs along Las Tunas. What's very interesting is how different this is from downtown Las Tunas further to the east. And the primary reason for that, if we could go to the next slide, is related to the trees. and I know in the beautification discussions that we had, a couple of years ago now, merchants were quite interested in this idea of a more generous tree canopy, even for the downtown trees, because it's a very wide street. And so these very tightly pollarded ficus trees make it kind of lonely out there in terms of those one-story buildings, wide street, and tiny trees. So there's a context issue that's kind of citywide, but it definitely impacts the character of this site. Next slide, please. And here, if we kind of look on the right-hand side, you can sort of see the lime green running along Las Tunas Boulevard up to about the middle of the slide, and then it falls off to where the trees are quite tightly trimmed for the rest of the way until, actually until Rosemead, or until Sultana for sure, where the site is.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
What's the square footage of the site?
Actually, that's coming in the next slide or two. I don't have it in my memory.
Okay. Oh, wait.
Okay. So on the left, we can see, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the site, the gateway right at the corner. It's a very distinctive but small-scaled kind of entryway to what was the chamber building. And there's also the resource of some pretty generous tree scale on the site, both at the perimeter and the center of the site. And these, some slides right at the site, kind of the character of the site, the gateway, and the old house, and a pretty big scale, empty, open parking lot. So the key things to say about the zoning for the site, 4 stories are allowed. There is a housing density allowed of 20 to 40 units per acre, an FAR of 1.5 to 2. The site coverage has to be a minimum of 60%. And that's going to be an important kind of point as we look at some of the options that we study. It's the front setback, 5-foot minimum, 10-foot maximum, 5-foot side setbacks, 10-foot setbacks to residential. And there's some more detail on setbacks. And then the maximum lot coverage is 100%. So we have a series of studies, again, as Mr. Cook noted, they are quite high-level studies in terms of really quick conceptual ideas. The first study is basically 1-story retail, which would continue the context of the existing street. And here are simply some examples of that. And I think what we would want to do is to hug the street, as the setbacks kind of encourage us to do, so that the retail continues to address the sidewalk in a very urban way. This basically would be I want to apologize to Council Member Vizcarra, because I think we've passed the analysis where we did state the area of the site.
No, I saw it. It was 21,000.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So here we have a 7,700 square foot retail building that goes in about 40 feet. That's not very deep for retail. And so that's maybe not a great advantage. And it would require 1 parking space per 250 square feet, which would be 31 spaces. So what's driving the kind of not very deep character of the space is the requirement for those 31 spaces. The benefits of this is that, at least currently, it's the most contextual related to the streetscape, but it doesn't take advantage of that purple zoning that was kind of shown in the original diagram. It's not very dense or active in terms of what it might do for that corner. I think it's probably a difficult pro forma. It's based on the land value and the construction costs and the market. And the most important thing code-wise, zoning code-wise, is that it does not achieve 60% lot coverage. Now, on each of these, we did a very, very kind of broad construction cost only. This could be sort of comparative between the schemes. And this one, we had a rough order of magnitude of 1.5 million. The second option is actually almost exactly the same footprint, but we thought, well, there is some popularity now for these incubator workplaces, where people could come find a place to work and basically lease or rent spots. And again, if we go to the next image, it's the same footprint. And again, the context is good. It does address a need for that kind of startup shared resource office space. And again, it may be difficult by in a pro forma. If we did look at something like containers or train cars or that kind of thing, it might be a doable scenario. And then, of course, it would need the kind of specialty landlord that would manage that whole process of an incubator. Again, though, zoning code-wise, it does not achieve 60% coverage. Roughly the same order of magnitude of construction cost, about 1.5 million. The fast food restaurant scenario, we looked at, first of all, some prototypes. And then it's a little bit of an odd shaped site, but we did study a couple of options. And the one that we sort of landed on as the most efficient is on the next slide, where we would come in one direction and loop and come out the other. And basically, this is an 1,800 square foot restaurant with 600 square foot of outdoor dining, which could include the sort of odd triangle of the site at the intersection proper. It's kind of fitting to the loose streetscape further west of downtown. But I guess I would suggest that it suburbanizes what could be a more dense extension of downtown as it moves west. And the corner site is a rather awkward geometry. It's probably not very safe from a traffic standpoint with the driveways so close to that intersection. And then there's the frequent in and out traffic related to residential across the way to the south. Again, like the other two, it does not achieve the 60% lot coverage. And the cost.
And Mr. Goodale, isn't 1,800 square feet kind of small?
Yes, it's a minimal kind of. I mean, there are places near my house that are little shacks where people are driving through and getting coffee. So I mean, you can do something, but it would not be. I would say the minimum sit-down restaurant would be around 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. For a non-sit-down restaurant, I think 1,800 square feet could work okay. It's just that there wouldn't be very much indoor dining, or if any.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So the next slide looks at either senior or affordable housing over retail. And we looked at senior for reasons that I think will come clear in a moment. But so if we think about, again, these prototypes, where basically you do continue the sidewalk facing retail streetscape that's there now, but build on top of that. And I think this is more what that purple zoning is targeting, is something of a bit more increased density here. We actually did, on the way here, to get to this concept, we went through a few options. And the one that seemed to make the most sense was one that hugged the street again, with both the retail and the face of the senior housing. And basically, the rectangle that's facing the street looks like it sort of fades off into white as it goes to the right, but that's a portal that you would drive through. You would be driving under the housing in order to access the parking and the subterranean parking below. So the retail here is 9,000 square feet. We have a maximum units per acre of 40, and that only allows us 19 units. We would be required 36 spaces for 9,000 square feet of retail. And if we went with senior housing, we think we can get by with 1 per unit or even less. With a study, usually senior housing just doesn't even get up to 1 for 1. The provided parking is 13 spaces at the ground and 41 spaces subterranean, for a total of 54.
I'm not on mute.
Sorry?
No, go ahead, David.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I had a quick question, Mary, if you don't mind.
Please, go ahead.
The $8.3 million price tag, does that include the subterranean parking, or is that in addition?
That includes the subterranean parking.
Okay, thank you.
And so the benefits here are that it addresses clearly a need in the state for housing in general. It does maintain retail at the sidewalk line. As you asked about that cost, what it does do is cost a lot because of the very odd site geometry, which makes for a pretty inefficient parking lot below. And then it would require a parking study, and the storm drainage treatment would probably be expensive, which could push that cost up a little, in the sense that we don't have a place to really percolate water, and we might have to have some kind of a subterranean storage system for water treatment. This would be the layout of the parking below, basically a center elevator core area that would be circulated around. And again, the 41 spaces. And usually the most efficient parking is where you get a double loaded aisle with parking on each side. Here you kind of have to give up the middle in terms of all of that area.
I'm sorry, where are the entrances to the subterranean?
It's right next to the alley. So if you come up that ramp at the very bottom, you would come out at the line of the top of that arrow, the end of that arrow. So it could be accessed.
Is it where those yellow dots, those yellow spots are?
No, it's the thin arrow at the very bottom of the purple. That yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I couldn't see it before. I see it now.
Okay. So you could come into that ramp either off of the alley or off of the parking from Las Tunas. It's a little awkward to get in off of the alley because it's so tight, but Las Tunas would probably be the in direction. And the next slide shows basically the housing portion, the housing tower, if you will, though it would only be 2 floors because we get kind of caught with the limits of the number of units that we can have. And these are basically 1 and 2 bedroom units with possibly studio units. It would get us up to 19 units are allowed. So that's one picture of how to do it. The next study was to look at the site as a public park and some prototypes of small kind of compact passive parks. And in this one, we have left as a concept, we've left the chamber building there, with the potential that, for instance, if the Parks Department were to use that for both storage, potential programs that could spill out into the park, and I think there's analysis to be made in terms of other facilities and also the sort of FTEs required to deal with that facility. It also could be storage for outdoor uses. We've left the parking kind of along the right edge of the park, which would get us about 31 spaces. It could provide kind of a green lung along Las Tunas corridor. That would be nice. And also to the residential neighborhoods west of the Civic Center. It's a nice way to continue to use the pergola and the paving that are there, and it certainly leverages the richness of the existing landscape. It may also be a transition to 4B, which we'll come to in a moment. What it doesn't seem to do is to really respond to a big need for park in that location. I don't think there's a lot of foot traffic that would sort of benefit by having a park there. It's probably not the safest place for children. And all in all, I think it may provide a very limited amount of value for the investment of improving it. Although the investment might not be terribly great for what how much would be treated. We would think about $500,000 would get us there for a modest park. The last study, and this kind of wheels off a prototype of old buildings being turned into intimate sort of restaurants, usually somewhat fine dining kinds of restaurants when you have oak floors and kind of a very nice interior. I think that house has a lot of potentials for that sort of thing. And there's a lot of outdoor area that would sort of flow out of the house and onto the paved area. So the last one we looked at is next, and we basically looked at building a kitchen, basically a contemporary, fully equipped kitchen to the east of the house, kind of in the back corner of the site. And we would then have about 2,400 square feet of enclosed area, including the kitchen, and about 600 square feet of outdoor dining area, which right now in kind of these years is an interesting proposition. And the required parking for that would be about 24. We're showing about 32. The benefits is that it would leverage all of the resources of the site, the trees, the pavilion, the entry. It conserves and adapts both the architectural and the landscape legacy of that corner. And it has a kind of unique street front activity if people were there outdoor dining and behind a landscape scrim. And it also kind of minimizes the surface parking in comparison with some of the other development options. The debits are that, again, unlike the option 3, it doesn't maximize the development potential for the site, doesn't provide housing. And I think this is one scenario where a single operator owner becomes the key to the success of the site. And it really has to be the right operator for it to work. And so the order of magnitude here is about 0.6 million. And then if we sort of equip the kitchen with sort of, and that's sort of a call between operator and city, I suppose, but it would be about 0.85 million with an equipped kitchen, the hood and range and all of the kitchen equipment. So I believe that concludes the last study. It sort of shows how one might imagine walking into the site if it were a restaurant. It didn't say Temple City, but it had the name of a restaurant, and that the kind of indoor character that might be sort of quite successful in terms of a place to sit down and dine. And then the last image, we did a kind of very rough Photoshop study of the existing condition from the entry driveway, and then what might happen if we were to pave and landscape the center of the site, tables, umbrellas, and basically turn it over to a place of dining. And that concludes the studies that we have done.
Well, thank you, Mr. Goodale, and thank you, Mr. Cook. At this time, I'll ask the council for questions, starting with Councilmember Chavez.
Hey, thank you. I don't know that I have many questions. I have many comments, but I can save those for later. Let me look at my notes real quick. I have a question. So in all of these different options, many of them, it looks like anticipate using that alley as either an entrance or an exit. Was any cost analysis done on the condition of that alley? And I know that I've been on it, and if you're going to use that for egress and ingress for anything, it's probably going to have to be redone. And I'm assuming that the values or the costs that we've been given did not include that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And do we have any estimate on what it would be to repave that? I guess maybe that's an unfair question, maybe outside your expertise, but I don't know, maybe Mr. Cook or anybody that staff that could address that?
If we look at our most recent pavement management work, probably $25,000 to $30,000 to do a normal paving. If you went concrete, that would be much more expensive than that, probably double that cost. But that would be my kind of back of the napkin estimate.
And is that a private street or a public street?
That is one, a little bit of a complication, but nothing that we couldn't overcome, is that the street is split. The property line still allows for the use, but there is an easement that cuts through part of that property. We did discuss that as well with David, and it's not an insurmountable issue to deal with anything, and we use the property now in that manner, but it would be something that we would have to address.
Okay. And just one final general question, Mr. Goodale. Which one of these options makes the most sense to you from your expertise?
Well, I think that sense versus affection, I guess I like both 3 and 4, the senior housing and the restaurant use. I think the senior housing probably, and this is something that can be explored, but I would be skeptical about it penciling out. And so for me, the most practical one, given the zoning code and the economics, would be the last one, the restaurant use.
Not the fast food, but the restaurant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have right now, Vince. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Mitt, questions?
I think I too have a lot of comments and not as many questions.
Okay.
Well, I'll ask one quick one there, you. Just so we know what 4A actually means. 4A is the public park. I know when we had gone through discussions related to Primrose, is it true that essentially once you determine something to be a park, it's hard to really change it to anything else in the future from a land use perspective?
That's correct. We would have, if you did designate that as a public park and the city at a future time decided to repurpose that property, we would have to find, it would have to be kind of a 1-for-1 replacement ratio somewhere within the proximity of that park as well. It can't just be anywhere in the city, but it would have to, you could, if there was some opportunity that came up and you had it designated as a park, you could remove that park, but there's a process and you would have to replace essentially kind of 1-for-1.
Somewhere else. Okay. All right. And actually, I just thought of another question. Regarding the 4B use that Mr. Goodell, you mentioned was one of your I guess in your experience with other comparable sites where an adaptive restaurant use was successfully implemented, I guess have you ever seen a case where, like our case, where the city wants actually open that site, or are those usually all private development where they go in and convert?
I do not know of a place where a city has been involved, but I don't think that would be a good measure of whether it's happened or not. I mean, there's so many of these where old buildings have been turned into new uses, and I would guess, including places that were redevelopment areas in the redevelopment era. So I would be surprised if there was not an example of that, but I'm not personally familiar with one.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions I have for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Vizcarra.
Well, I think everything I was thinking about it has pretty much been answered. And I kind of like the idea of the senior housing with a fast food thing on the ground floor. The other thing I was thinking about, and I don't know how this would work. For some reason, as we're looking at that, I was thinking of Homeboy Industries. That's kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a charitable use or what, but I was thinking it would have a public mantra, and maybe something like that could be set up there where it's a benefit to the community. Anyway, just an idea, something to think about.
And are you suggesting that in association with the senior housing or as a standalone?
No, that's two separate concepts.
Uh-huh.
Do you mean like using part of the facility when you talk about Homeboy, like a bakery or one of their restaurants?
Either one. Either
Yeah.
one that would work. But it wouldn't have the feel of a private for profit. It'd be more I guess a public for profit, something to maintain a particular group or groups.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Mayor, I just want to real quick, I think Councilmember Viscara may have misspoke, or at least I may have heard it. It's not senior affordable housing over fast food, it's senior affordable housing over retail. I think
Right.
were you- Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll accept that amendment.
okay, I just want to make sure, because that wasn't one of the options, but I guess it could be if you want.
All right. Any other questions, Councilmember Viscara?
No, that's it.
Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist?
I don't have any questions. No, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I do have a couple questions on the garden dining 4B concept. Are there any examples that you can point us to?
Let's see. There's one. They're all in different cities, but for instance, the Inn of the Seventh Ray in Topanga Canyon is one. There is in Pasadena a place called the Raymond, which is right on Raymond Avenue, and you kind of go down a little ramp, and there's an old house there and a patio.
I think they call that the
Okay.
Raymond Inn.
Okay.
Also in Pasadena, there's Marston's.
Yes.
Marston's was a little house at one time.
Yeah, and places like Carmel are full of them.
Okay,
That's
that's great. Yeah. The other one, which is for the park, for the 4A, question for Mr. Cook is that if we were to do the park conversion, I know it's minimal cost, like $500,000. Would we have like Measure A money or some other park development money that we can tap into if we were to do a park?
Yes, we do have the ability. We do have Part Measure A money that we are going to be coming back to you relatively soon with Mr. Matsumoto, and I will be coming back to you with some ideas. But yes, and also Measure A competitive grants as well at the county level.
Okay. The other question I have is sort of a quasi question and comment. Today we talk about a lot of possible physical concepts. We never really talk about the process to get there. So I guess one of tonight's purpose, I guess, to narrow down some of the would I be correct to say that part of tonight's purpose is narrow down some of these concepts, and then Mr. Cook, and you'll come back with the process to get there, because some of these may be, like a park may be simple for the city to develop, but if we were to do senior housing over retail, because that's a big project, we might need to issue a notice of availability under the Surface Land Act, and then later on make it available to developer to submit proposals. Would I be correct?
Yes, sir. We would. What we'd like tonight is kind of if there's some concepts that you just don't like, or just like it's kind of a no-go, then we would want to know that, and then what we would do we would come back to you in less than 60 days with here's what the process is to go through and each of these projects, and then also too on top of that, because it's not free, even though we own the land fund money, and we would go through that as well. David just provided you, Mr. Goodell just provided you today with a rough order of magnitude of construction costs, but we would also provide you with kind of timelines and costs related to what each of those developments look like. We've been fortunate with the Primrose project to have the state grant and other funding sources. We would have to, for lack of a better term, cobble together a bit more.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cook. And at this time, I'd like to open public comment. Madam Clerk, are there any, I don't see any callers. Are there any email public comments?
Mayor Yu, there are no public callers and there are no email requests to speak.
Okay, I will close public comment. At this time will be the council final questions or comments. Again, I'll start with Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mayor Yu. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Goodell. By the way, are we pronouncing your name right? I've heard it pronounced like four different ways. Is it Goodell, Goodell?
It's Goodale.
Goodale. See, none of us are right. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Mr. Goodale. That sounds even better. So I want to thank you and your staff for the work that you put into this as well as our staff who may have helped out. I actually went through each of them, of course, as most of my colleagues did, I'm sure. And I have a little bit to say about each of those. First of all, I'll try to be quick. The one-story retail, I'm not big on that. I think traditional resale is actually disappearing. I think especially now with the pandemic, everyone has changed their ways. I'm not sure we're ever going to go back to the traditional way of shopping ever again, to be honest with you. There's a better way of doing things that we found out. Also, I think we already have many vacant retail locations on Las Tunas. This could turn into another one. I think there's a lot of risk involved, not to mention the fact that this project, we would lose all the trees that are there. And I know that in your report, there was a mention of the rich resource of existing trees that we have. And I was glad that you pointed that out. The second one, the one-story incubator. I had never heard of that before, honest. I had asked our city manager what the heck that was all about. Apparently there are a couple of them in Pasadena. They are unique. I think it's a little stepping outside the box. From what I understand in the research I did, these are these shared resource offices. Kind of reminds me of a hangout for techies. But the young people will probably love something like this, a place to really explore possibilities without putting too much money and effort into it. So it's not a bad idea. Option 3, the fast food. I'm not really wild about this option. I'm not sure it would be a great welcome to our city to have a fast food entrance right at the beginning, entering our city. I think the noise issues would be there as far as the residential areas that are nearby. I think it would yield some tax dollars, but I think the offset from that far outweighs the positives on that. The senior and affordable housing over the retail. Again, same negatives regarding the retail. I'm not sure how affordable this housing would be. I'm sure we haven't gotten to that point. It is a very expensive area. And I have concerns, again, regarding that alleyway behind. It comes with a very high price tag. I think the 8.3 million is a very conservative amount. I think it's going to cost much more than that. I do know from past discussions we've had, anytime you're talking about subterranean parking, it presents its own issues as well as the cost. Number 4, I believe, which is the public park. I would prefer to really refer to this more as an open green space area. And I think to address Council Member Mann's concerns, it was the same concerns I had. Anytime you refer to something as a public park, it can be very difficult, especially for a small city like ours, to back out of that if we decide to change that later on. I would be more in favor of sort of a hybrid of that area, more of an open green space. It will accomplish some of the things that we've been talking about, preserving the trees, of course, It also looks like a nice welcome to our city. I would prefer that there'd be, of course, no playground area there. I do agree with the Mr. Goodale's statement about it would be unsafe for children, I believe, in that particular area because of the traffic. I think the parking would be welcome in that area because of the restaurants and things that we already have there. Adding some EV stations would be a good addition to that parking lot as well. I would even leave the building. I think that was mentioned in the report, using it as storage. There are bathrooms in that building. I think it would be a good source for the city to have. And I think it just overall would look pretty good. Not to mention the fact that it doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And by designating it simply as open green space, we may be able to overcome the public park issue. That, of course, our attorneys will have to sort that out for us. The last one, the restaurant. Before Mr. Goodale's report, I wasn't too much in favor of that, although it is a very attractive use. I think the right restaurant, of course. You know, I know, you know, working in Pasadena, there are a number of these types of restaurants there. And Mr. Goodale is absolutely right. It depends on who's running it, and the type of restaurant will dictate whether or not it's successful or not. And it can be a kind of a risky venture for the city as well. And as Mayor, you pointed out, I think, you know, looking at down the road, if depending on which one we pick, what are the funding opportunities going to be for each of these? It sounds like the restaurant would be more of a private type of situation. Somebody, of course, would have to come in and build out to their liking. I think that's all I have to say. I think if I had to rank them in my order of preference, I would go for the open green space first. I like the one-story incubator, actually. I think it's a unique idea, something that would maybe do well in our city, considering you know, the youth that we have. And then lastly, probably the restaurant would probably be my third choice. That's it for me. Thank you, Mayor Yu.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Min, comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Yu. I do have a couple comments that I might interweave with some questions. Actually, the questions might actually be more for our Senator, Mr. Cook. First of all, I thank you, Mr. Goodale, for putting this together. I especially appreciated you putting it in the context of zoning code and the development standards that are in place right now. I thought that really shone a light on what constraints are at the site. I mean, we know it's a small site, but until you actually start putting down, you know, square footages, diagrams of where parking is, where the physical buildings could be located, you know, how would subterranean parking work, then you realize how restrictive that lot really is. And I think I won't comment on every single option. I think in summary, I'm not really a big fan of options 1 through 3. And I say that because I don't think the immediate goal in my mind for the site is to maximize development potential. I think the goal is to maximize public benefit. And so I think, kind of similar to what Councilmember Chavez said, an open space area that is not designated as a park is what I really saw this use for us in the immediate future. It seems like it would overall have a much lower cost, and there is a lot of existing things already on the site that can be reused. I like the term adaptive reuse. In fact, I like both 4A and 4B. I don't know if that's possible to us as a city to have an open space that could have a mix of a multitude of uses. So one question I would have for our staff, particularly our Parks and Rec staff is whether or not there are uses that we can kind of come up with for a site like this, whether it's an existing program that we know needs additional spaces that this area could accommodate or complement, or perhaps we come up with new programs that we have been to do and that's in the pipeline, and with this additional space, maybe that can allow us to do that. Regards to the restaurant concept, when I was going through the report, the first place I thought of was actually this small restaurant in South Pasadena, Fiore Market Cafe. It's off of Fremont and El Centro. It looks exactly like an old house that was converted into a restaurant as outdoor seating. It's comparable, if I recall, in terms of, if not smaller than ours here. But I don't know if it would complicate things if we had an area that had like flexible use between a restaurant that's probably going to be there full time versus uses of the lot. That probably is not feasible. But what about I've seen other cities and properties use these I guess for lack of a better word, these asphalt parking lots and for like a small food truck, a small food fair. I mean, we have our farmers market that use the city hall space. They could also use that space if it makes more sense. I don't know. I see a lot of possibilities here, and I like the idea of the flexible space because we really don't know what the future of development in the area is after the pandemic. And so I think for us to make a decision now to go towards commercial, retail, fast food, or any type of development that's going to have a pretty large upfront capital costs in construction, like Member Chavez mentioned, that's a big risk for not just us to take, because once you designate that property and a developer comes in and does it, it's kind of hard to undo it and go back to what we have right now. And so I would encourage us to think of maybe creative ways we can kind of expand uses that could maximize public benefit. I do want to make a comment on something that's needed with that type of public use. I think for that particular segment of Las Tunas, right, you have cars that are going eastbound on Las Tunas. They're coming off of the Green Rosemead, and they're speeding down. I think a lot of traffic are written in that corridor. But that, if you recall, that there's a very unique lane configuration that kind of, it's very wide coming off of Rosemead, and then it kind of like shrinks down to where the site is. So in my mind, there's engineering and other aspects that can be done along that area that can mitigate for some of the public safety concerns if we choose to deem this to be some sort of public space. So I don't see that as a great of a debit. I mean, if you left it as it is, I agree that is certainly a concern, but I don't see that as an issue that cannot be overcome. And yeah, love to hear what everyone else says.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Min. Councilmember Vizcarra.
Yeah, I see that site as an entryway to the city, and whatever is going to go there, I think should send a message about what we are, the kind of city we are. I still like is it okay if I say affordable housing or senior housing, Tom? With the underground parking and with some kind of a food place on the first floor. And because you see that as you come in, you get an idea of what the city's about, and and if obviously is constructed attractively, it's going to send a message. The other thing I like along the same lines and for the same reasons is the idea of a Raymond Inn type, or the other restaurants you guys mentioned there, with outdoor dining and a cozy atmosphere projected. Those are the two things I'd like to see the most.
Thank you, Councilmember Scar. Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist.
Yes, Mr. Goodale, thank you for your good work there with giving us the different ideas. I really like the ability to reuse the building that's there. So the adaptive reuse of a potential restaurant, such as the one in South Pasadena or the one in Pasadena, not too far further north there, the Raymond, I think are very unique places. I know Fiora, I think, has been extremely successful and very much supported by the community. The same with the Raymond. The Raymond has been there for a very, very long time, and it's just a lovely place to go and dine. Actually, both of them are. But I like the ability to have something unique like that when you're first entering our city. I think the pergola on the outside is very attractive, and I think it's very eye-catching, and the building itself is really a pretty building. And I think it'd be great if we were able to reuse that for some type of restaurant. I know that the challenge is going to be in finding someone that will come in there and really do a bang-up job for us. But I think there are people out there, and I think there are risk takers that would be willing to invest in a restaurant in Temple City, such as that place. My second preference would be the green space, not calling it a park, but we are an aging community, and as much as we, love to take care of our youth, I just don't know how much I'd like a trendy incubator place that might be popular for a while, and then, then it's not so trendy anymore, and then we're stuck with a bunch of open type of cubicle things. But I'm not really crazy about the affordable housing. I just think it's too small and too few units. So I think my first choice would be for the adaptive reuse, whatever that might look like, and then the green space.
Right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you. I too actually agree with a lot of things that's been said. So I'm not going to repeat what's been said, but I think in generally I tend to agree with Councilmember Chavez the most. I do think that this being a gateway to the city, when the road kind of to make a turn into our downtown area, this could be a very good place where if we're going to use the open green space concept, this might be a good place that we can really place a monument or something that really define what a city is. I like the idea of the green space because it has the least investment. And, I think what Councilmember Mendez talked about in this post-COVID world, I think retail is really unknown which way to go. So I tend to be a little bit more conservative, and I think that we might want to take this immediate step or the intermediate step to develop that into a green space. We are an under-parked city. Granted, maybe some people think it may not be quite a pedestrian place, but I think, as an entrance to the city, to show some green, some nicely developed landscaping, perhaps with a monument with some artwork, might be a good way to welcome our visitors from, at least coming from the west side. Now, I'm intrigued by the garden restaurant concept, but I think I'm curious how we're going to develop that. I mean, basically, and maybe that's why I asked the question: what would the next step be if we were going to do a restaurant with adaptive reuse? Because I don't see how the city, because not knowing which kind of restaurant it is, it could be a Thai restaurant, it could be some French restaurant, could be because you really cannot build a kitchen ahead of who the proposed food use would be. So, and then each restaurant being a private business have their own decor and everything else. I mean, their theme. So basically, you'll be asking for a proposal for somebody to come in to develop that. And the way I understand about the Surface Land Act, you will have to declare before you can make it available for any other uses. So I'll be curious if we were to pursue 4B, what kind of a process we need to go through in order to get there. And I guess my last one that I kind of also curious is the affordable housing concept. I know it's a big money, but again, it will not be something that the city will be building. It will be basically putting out notices of availability and asking perhaps an affordable housing developer to come in and develop it. So I'll be curious about that third use. The other one, and I am not as as excited, but overall, I think these are great concepts. I want to thank Mr. Goodale for being very creative in bringing us. I think great design, and I appreciate the analysis that you and Mr. Cook and staff have put together. With that, Mr. Cook and Mr. Murphy, do we need a motion, or is that enough of discussion to help you to go to the next step?
I will say on my part, I don't need any motion tonight. I believe what the city manager was looking for was some direction or guidance as to what he should bring back to you. Certainly, it seems that the five of you are on the same page with what you're looking to see next. So unless the city manager wants a definitive motion, I'm fine.
No, I don't need a definitive motion, and I'm very clear that you don't want fast food.
Okay.
So,
right.
but as Mary, you said, I did hear somewhat of a consensus around green space, restaurant, and housing, but most importantly, talking about the process that gets there. I would call some of this would be maybe a request for interest as well in some of that process, to understand what really truly the obligations of the city would be and what the obligations of the private entity would be, and how we would kind of get through that. The green space component is pretty straightforward. So what we'll do is we'll take those concepts where we heard some level of consensus about today, bring those back in a package to show you that process.
And
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I can add that I'll bring for the full council's understanding the different ways that a city would dispose of property. One, as you said, sir, the Surplus Land Act, but an alternative process that helps to feed itself into some newer economic development statutes that have been passed in the last few years that require certain findings and require supermajority votes. But if the four of you are on the same page, certainly could help guide this in the exact direction you want instead of using that surplus process that I know you know well, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. If there are no other council comments or questions, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda tonight.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Goodale.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time, I guess. So the next item on our agenda is the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust membership. The City Council is requested to consider a membership of the San Gabriel Valley Regional Trust. The Housing Trust creates a mechanism that increases the region's competitiveness to capturing funding and financing for affordable housing activities. I will turn the floor over to Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mayor Yu, members of the council. With us today also is Brielle Acevedo with the trust as a staff member of the trust. She'll be just going over a brief so that you have an understanding of what the trust is doing now, its membership makeup, some of the projects it's doing. Madam Clerk, if next slide, please. So tonight, we would recommend that you would consider joining the trust, but in this case, determining the membership level. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background, and Ms. Acevedo will go over this too. The trust is a JPA. You belong to a JPA now. It's the California Insurance Authority, a Joint Powers Insurance Authority. So JPAs are a mechanism in which a group of agencies work together for a common goal and common purpose. No different with this JPA. This was enacted and allowed legislatively and by law through Senator Rubio about 1.5 years ago, and allows any city in the San Gabriel Valley and the county to join this authority. JPAs generally, when we're talking about other types of infrastructure JPAs, allow an entity to issue debt or receive public or private funds in order to accomplish a public goal. In this case, affordable housing throughout the region. Next slide, please. Now, in our case, there's 2 membership levels in which to consider. One is an affiliate level, which allows the city to show support for regional housing production in the San Gabriel Valley. This is a much lower fee, which next year we would be able to use PHLA funds, which you appropriated last year for improvements to low-income ADA improvements. So this would not be a general fund expenditure. This $3,000 a year would come from those special funds. The city would not be allowed to access any of the funds or be part of the board of directors, but would be what would allow us to transition into full membership. And Ms. Acevedo will talk about that in just a few moments. This would allow us, a full membership would allow us to, if we had any projects, which we don't have any projects now exactly, even though our previous discussion talked about an affordable housing project, but there is nothing that's off the ground at this point or even close to off the ground. That funding requirement would be $15,000 a year administrative fee. That could also be paid for up to 50% of our yearly allocation of PHLA funds. So the affiliate membership, we could cover the entire cost. 50% could cover for the $15,000 a year. Next slide, please. One element on the staffing side that we'd like for the council to consider is that we're going through the housing element update. And this is something we thought that we could include as an implementation measure for the housing element update, of which the state is going through a very rigorous certification process, including doing sites inventory. And that site inventory is not simply just allowing for the zoning in an area, but going through a process of investigating the site, looking at the site. So this is what we thought could, even on the affiliate level, could provide us with at least something to add for the state. Next slide, please. So should the council elect to join, we would recommend at this point, if the council was to decide to join, at this point, staff would recommend being at the affiliate level, and we would join as of July 1st so that we can actually use those PHLA funds rather than general fund dollars for the membership. And that would assist us going forward. With that, I'm going to turn it over, Mayor Yu, if that's okay, to Ms. Acevedo.
Yeah, please.
Review
Yeah,
of
Ms.
the trust.
Yeah, Ms. Azevedo, welcome. Good evening. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Briella Azevedo, and I am the administrator for the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, this is basically an overview of what Mr. Cook was just telling us about the fees to join the trust. So very excited to share that as of now, 21 of the 30 cities have joined the Housing Trust. So you would be the 22nd if you decide to join. And what this shows here is that member and affiliate member fees are based on population bands. And the real difference here is that affiliate membership is to show support for housing in the region, and that membership fee, which is at a higher level, enables cities to apply for funding for a project in their jurisdiction or to run for a seat on the board. And then these operational funds are, or these membership fees are used for the operational funding for the organization. Okay, and then the next slide talks a little bit more about capital funds. So as was also mentioned, as a JPA, the trust can receive and leverage both public and private funds. So to date, public funds that the trust has received an allocation of local housing trust funds from the state. So the trust applied last August to the state for this matching grant award and was awarded $1 million, which will support 71 units of housing, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. And then also permanent local housing allocation, or PLHA funds. So PLHA funds are allocated to cities either directly as entitlement cities or through the county. And often we see that cities are allocated small. I always use Claremont as our example. They get around $80,000, which won't translate to direct units in that city. But if that's coupled with dollars from other cities, and if it's pooled and then the trust is able to match it with state funding, that could be a significant amount of funding that could really support a project in the San Gabriel Valley. And so PLHA funds, which can be allocated to the trust, can be also used as matching funds for the Local Housing Trust Fund state program. And then in terms of private funds, the trust is currently doing its strategic plan and funding strategy, which will help guide the organization for the next 3 to 5 years. And that is anticipated to be complete in June. So that kind of private fundraising piece will be forthcoming. Okay, next slide. So I mentioned that the trust received an award of $1 million from the state. And this is going to support 71 units of affordable housing at 2 projects, one in Claremont, 15-unit project that did not use tax credits, which was exciting, and then 56 units of affordable housing in Pomona. So half of the award is from the state and the other half is from the trust. And so the application for this program will be released sometime later this month, and the trust would anticipate applying again. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how do you get your project on the pipeline? So the trust is operating the San Gabriel Valley Project Pipeline, which is the first step to receiving funding. Projects must be located in a member city and have member city support. So that was something that was really important to us, was that cities are the members of the JPA and they need to be on board with any projects that are applying for funding. And so projects are added by completing an application at our website. And so that can be completed either by the developer with a city staff contact or directly by city staff. And we just did a big push as part of our strategic plan to identify all of the current projects in the San Gabriel Valley. So we're currently at 19 projects totaling over 1,100 units. And as I mentioned, expecting that next LHTF application to be released later this month. So the next slide shows you visually what the pipeline looks at right now. So definitely diverse. A lot of different cities have proposed projects, various sizes and different funding gaps. So this list would serve as the list that we would select from as we apply to that state program later this summer. And so the next slide is the other big initiative that we're working on right now. So we had some Measure H funding and some other funding that needed to be expended by the end of 2021. And we realized that the San Gabriel Valley has a really big need for emergency shelter. There's currently, as of the last point in time count, over 3,000 unhoused individuals in the San Gabriel Valley. And this tiny home non-congregate shelter program offers an opportunity to address emergency shelter needs in a way that is COVID compliant and really cost effective. So we are working with 4 cities right now to do tiny home sites within their cities. They would range in size between 5 and 15 shelters and would help reduce homelessness in that area. So clients would be selected directly from that area, and there would be case management on site. And so looking for a minimum commitment of 1 year, and if we get enough operational funding, could extend the program for up to 3 years. Okay, and then so my final slide here is just some of the other things that we're working on. So the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust has some regional planning funds, and with that, I already mentioned our strategic plan. Also, we'll be doing a surplus land use study to take a look at parcels in the San Gabriel Valley and what we could possibly do there to increase affordable and homeless housing. Taking a look at some innovative methods. So both for housing finance, like I mentioned, that Claremont project did not use tax credits, and some construction innovation, whether that's modular or something else. So taking a look at ways to augment housing through finance and construction methods, and then developing an affordable housing incubator. So we think that this is something that's really exciting because across the San Gabriel Valley, cities have different levels of housing staff and experience with housing, experience with developers. And so this would serve as a space where member cities could learn from other cities, share best practices, meet with developers, and help come up with solutions for housing issues in their city. And then also taking a look at whether or not it would make sense to have a land trust, either on its own or within the housing trust. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you so much. I'll start council questions with Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Mary Yu. Just a couple of quick questions. How many are on the board of directors currently? How many members on the board of directors?
It's a 9-member board.
And what are their terms?
It's a great question. So there was a cleanup legislation bill, SB 1212, that came out and said that half of the board, it was intended to have half the board elected in even years and half the board elected in odd. So the short answer is 2 years. However, for this first year, there'll be a couple of board members that serve a 1-year term.
So is this controlled by some other government entity then, and not internally, as far as how many members and how many years you serve?
The board is elected by the Council of Governments governing board.
Oh, okay. So it has nothing to do with the members. The full-time, I see that to be on the board of directors, you have to be a full member.
Yes.
But they are actually chosen by COG, not by the member cities.
So it's broken down. There's 7 regional seats. So Northeast, Northwest, South, and I could send over a breakdown later of all the cities that belong to each region. And then 2 spaces for a housing and homelessness expert, which is defined as 5 or more years of regional affordable housing experience. And so eligible council members for those 7 seats I mentioned apply to serve on the board, and then if there are multiple people running for the same seat, it's the Council of Governments governing board that would help make a selection.
And why no members from affiliate members? Why no board? Why can no one from the affiliate members be on the board of directors? Is that a policy decision made by COG or someone else?
It was determined during the creation of the JPA. So all of the San Gabriel Valley cities were invited to opine during that creation of the joint powers agreement, which is actually before I started with the trust, so I don't want to mess up the history, but I know that it's the way the agreement was written.
I suppose that could change at some point if you get more affiliate members.
Definitely, and the idea isn't that affiliate members aren't important or can't make their opinions known, especially with this new webinar format. Everyone's able to join meetings and chime in, and we also do working groups directly with staff. So even full members, not every member will have a representative on the board, just because 21 cities and 9 spaces doesn't allow for that. So there's
I understand that,
direct-
but I understand that. My only concern is that kind of creates a second class. You allow for affiliate membership, but they basically are a silent group for the most part. I'm assuming they can attend the meetings, but they certainly can't. They have no voice on the board or even have the opportunity to be on the board. So I have a little concern about that. Let's see. I'm sure you heard the discussion we had on the proposed senior affordable housing project on our agenda this evening. Could we, if we were to join this group as a full member, could we receive funds for that type of project? Is that something that would qualify for this funding that is being offered?
Based on what I saw, it sounds like it would be eligible.
You're not sure though.
No, I wouldn't say that. Basically, if we're using the state's local housing trust fund program for matching, that program specifically requires 30% of your units to be for 30% area median income or less. And I know I didn't see a
Yeah, so it would
unit
depend on,
population breakdown.
yeah, so it depends on what we would do with it, how we would
It just
frame it.
depends on the level of affordability.
Right. I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One more, Vince.
You're on mute there, sir.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I was on mute. Thank you. Councilmember Min, any questions?
Yes, I do have a few questions. Thank you. Kind of maybe following up with Councilmember Chavez's question. You mentioned there's a pipeline of projects in place, and I presume all these projects are within full member cities. How are the priorities of projects determined in any given year? Is it determined by the board, or is there a process?
It is determined by the board. We have a board meeting tomorrow where we're actually voting on our scoring guidelines for our next upcoming allocation of funds. So at this point, since the trust has a limited amount of funding supply, we have determined that our best use of funds is to apply to the state matching fund program, which is the LHTF program I mentioned, where we received $1 million earlier this year. So at this point, projects are going to be prioritized on the pipeline that would score the highest on that state application. So part of that is, lower percent or more affordability.
Okay, and okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And just maybe maybe not so much a question, is more of an observation, because in the PowerPoint it does list who the current board of directors are from which cities, as well. I noticed the housing/homeless experts can be non-elected officials. They had the city manager of Almonte. But I just couldn't help but notice that the projects you listed that I'm guessing they're ongoing for the HTF application are all within the cities that have a member on the board. Correct. And also the fact that the city of Almonte is overrepresented on 2 members. One is their council member and one is their city manager. So I think I'd be concerned just about how that whole setup is and what that means for affiliate members, as well as, even if you're a full-time member, have a seat on the board. What does that mean? Because unfortunately, I think with all these things going on, one's fighting for ultimately a limited pool. So, but other than that, I think it's an interesting concept, and I appreciate your time explaining what's happening in the current what's currently happening with the trust. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. I know it wasn't quite a question, but I just wanted to let you know that I reached out equally to every city. We reached out directly to city managers from every one of the eligible cities, which was 18 out of the 21. We have 3 affiliate members, and interfaced directly with staff. I do think that some of what we're seeing is more projects from cities that have bigger housing departments or more traditionally have done affordable housing in within their jurisdiction. So that's something that we'd be looking to help address through that affordable housing incubator.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And I think if you take a deeper look at our general plan, even just the space that we have, the opportunities certainly are less than some other cities in the same. So that I understand. That's all the questions I have, Mayor Yu.
Thank you, Councilmember Min. Councilmember
Mayor,
Vizcarra, any questions?
Mayor Yu, before we go on to Councilmember Vizcarra, if I might, just a real quick follow-up question to Councilmember Mann. So I note on the project pipeline, it has City Arcadia, but the property is actually in county-owned property. How is that given? Why is that given credit to the City of Arcadia?
The property is within the City of Arcadia. It is owned by the redevelopment successor agency.
Well, it says on your PowerPoint that it's county-owned vacant parcel. I have no independent knowledge of who owns it, but I'm just reading off of your report or your PowerPoint, where it lists the San Gabriel Valley project pipelines. And one of the cities that has a project in the pipeline is listed as Arcadia, called Lucille Street Project, but it says it's county-owned vacant parcel. So I'm not quite sure I understand that.
Currently owned by LACDA as the redevelopment successor agency for the county, but it's a project within the confines of the City of Arcadia.
Well, that's kind of similar to when you say you have an Arcadia post office address, but you actually live in LA County area, I guess, right? Is that the correct analogy then? That's not Arcadia, it's county area.
I don't want to misunderstand the concern, but the county would be willing to donate the land to.
My concern is it just seems to be a misrepresentation of actually who is doing the project. I mean, is it Arcadia or is it LA County?
Arcadia would be the lead here.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Councilmember Chavez, any more questions?
No, thank you.
This? All right, Councilmember Vizcarra, any questions for?
Well, yeah, I heard what my 2 colleagues just asked, and they were germane. And I'm just having trouble. And Brian, maybe you can elucidate at a later time to me what's in it for us. Why is this something we would even want to do? Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at right now. That's it.
Mr. Cook, you want to address that?
Sure. Well, one, affordable housing is a regional issue, and our ability to kind of show that support and through a funding source that can't go anywhere else. Our PHLA funds cannot go to any other type of activity. So this would be funding that we would be providing this entity that's not coming out of the general fund or anywhere else, but to express the need of affordable housing as a regional need. A side note is at some point, if there is an affordable housing project in the city, this is an easy transition to go into full membership. The other one, and this is a little bit more controversial, is that at some point in time, as I pointed out, and as we pointed out many times, land values are so expensive in Temple City. And we kind of demonstrated some of the cost construction issues related to a senior housing project just on that site. It's my hope at some point that the state looks at the RHNA numbers more regionally. And if you're part of an entity like this, and this would be very controversial for a lot of cities, but to look at maybe what the regional affordable housing is and how that credits, even though that won't be something that's in the existing housing element, but something into the future that could provide us looking at having the state look at affordable housing from a regional perspective, because there are truly cost constraints that lie in Temple City. The land value alone to construct just regular construction has been prohibitive for regular commercial for-profit projects. And so taking a step like this would be one to say, okay, hopefully in the future, we can start looking at affordable housing a little bit more regionally. And just because we are not hitting all of our RHNA numbers, but if there's some RHNA numbers within our region, maybe that's something that could be explored in the future. That will be a very controversial thing to address from a state legislation standpoint, but from our perspective, as staff's perspective, it's going to be hard to do affordable housing in Temple City just because of land value alone. And then it's something we can add to the housing element. It's not a requirement of the housing element, but affordable housing and the sites inventory that they're going to do will be part of the housing element. If we can demonstrate, membership, hopefully that gets us some, for lack of a better term, some points with the state, even though it's not defined in the state law related to the housing element. So those are some of the reasons.
Yeah, other than that, I still wonder how it benefits us based on what I already knew and everything you just said about our property values and cost of construction and everything else. I'm not sure why we would want to get involved, but I'll reserve judgment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Vizcarra. Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist, questions?
I have no questions. I have a very good understanding of the trust and its formation and how the board was selected. I will tell you that there wasn't an abundance of people applying to serve on the board of directors. But fortunately, the people that did had served on the some of the many committees within COG that meet, twice monthly with affordable housing and the homelessness group. So those members also came from a broader group that participates in SCAG, who very much is involved in affordable housing. So there is a history of how that board was selected, but just knowing the people that are on that board have been engaged with SCAG for many, many years on their housing committee there. So I think they have a lot of experience. I think that at a minimum, I'd definitely like us to, participate, but as far as questions, I have no other questions or no questions.
Thank you. Well, I have quite a few questions, but mainly it's because I don't know enough about the trust fund. So I'm going to ask some naive question here. With the so there's two. Looks like there's two funds here. One is called Local Housing Trust Fund. The other one is called Permanent Local Housing Allocation Funds. Perhaps Ms. Azevedo or Ms. Cook can explain the difference. And if I hear it correctly, there's $1 million in the local trust fund. And then what about the other funding, the
Sure.
PLHA funding?
So the Local Housing Trust Fund is actually a program. So it's a program run by HCD from the state of California. So we received an award of $1 million, and that required the trust to put in its own matching funds. So we could support $2 million worth of projects. And that is separate from the permanent local housing allocation, which is given directly to entitlement cities and through the county to non-entitlement cities. And I noted that as a potential source of public funds. So some cities have already allocated PLHA funds to the trust. And then as Mr. Cook mentioned, we enacted a policy so that some PLHA funds can be used to offset membership dues. And so we're hoping that that means that next fiscal year, additional cities will be allocating their PLHA funds to the trust. And so the reason we kept that at 50% for full membership was so that the remaining allocation of PLHA funds would go towards capital projects, because PLHA is a source of public funding that can be used as matching for that HCD program. So if the trust has $5 million on hand, it's able to ask for up to $5 million in matching funds from the state. So I mentioned PLHA as one of the potential sources that can help us get there.
Okay. And for City of Temple City, I think as Mr. Cook mentioned, we have access to the PLHA funds. How much funds do we have for Temple City? Is that an annual allocation?
It's for 5 years. Mr. Cook, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Do you know what your city's allocation is?
Mr.
Thank
Cook,
you,
yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Azevedo. Yes, it's for a 5-year period, and we allocated a little over $50,000 to that. So we would, and that was for the projects that would assist low-income households with ADA type of improvements. So we could, for the budget that's coming this coming year, if the council directed us to do either affiliate or full membership, we would budget it for fiscal year 21-22. 2021 is already appropriated.
I see. Okay. The next follow-up question is kind of to Councilmember Chavez's question earlier. There's San Gabriel Valley project pipeline. There are a number of projects in here, and they're all showing funding gaps requests from 1 million to all the way to like $37 million. So, Ms. Azevedo, so with the trust, I mean, these are big numbers. So how would the trust fund help these projects? And because the reason I'm asking is really to Councilmember Chavez's point, if we were to go, earlier we talked about that small piece of property that we have. If we were to, put that out for asking for proposals, how would we be helped? Because there's so many other projects, already in front of us.
Sure. So the way projects are currently being evaluated is based on the guidelines for that state matching source of funds. That can definitely change as we continue to work on our funding strategy and gain access to additional funding. But at this point, that's the best way to use our funds. So you're very correct. There's a project on there that has a lofty goal that needs to find additional sources of funding. But basically, projects would the pipeline is just that first phase, right? So the pipeline is the way to say, here's a project in our jurisdiction for the board to acknowledge that it exists. And it's actually helps with the scoring of that state application. So one of the factors for scoring is having a pipeline, posting it on your website, and if you have more than 3 times the request for the amount of funding you're requesting from the state, that's how you score the highest amount of points on that application. So definitely that's too many projects to fund in 1 year, and they're also in various stages of pre-development. So not all of them would be starting construction in a time that makes sense for inclusion in the application. So projects would be evaluated based on when they're getting started, what is their construction timeline, the population that they'd be serving. So lower income units would score higher for that state matching application. And then if the trust does not have $5 million of its own to apply to the state, it can also serve as a pass-through entity for cities. So a way for them to double some funding that they have on hand to support a project in their jurisdiction, whether that's PLHA funding or another source of eligible funds that they're dedicating to an affordable housing project.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I have no further questions. Not that I understand it, but I think I show enough ignorance here. So with that, I'll open public comments. Madam Clerk, are there any callers or are there any email comments?
Mayor Yu, there are no public callers and there are no email comments.
Okay. I will close public comment. This time I will go back to the council for final questions or comments. Councilmember Chavez?
Thank you, Mayor Yu. Well, first of all, I think this item is timely based on our recent decisions concerning homeless and the housing elements, things that have been on our last few meetings. This is a timely request, I believe, and certainly relevant to what we've been discussing the last few weeks. I have no problem with the ideals, the goals of this this trust. It seems that it's certainly set up to gain access to both public and private funds for the benefit of cities. And usually it's my understanding, and when you're involved in a JPIA or JPA, you have the ability to access perhaps funds that you normally would not. And so that would be certainly an advantage. My only concern is that because we don't have any current projects or really anything in the near future, even though we just got through discussing a potential, I'm not sure that's going to go anywhere in the near future either. I think the affiliate membership would be sufficient for now, given the comments, I believe, that Mr. Cook has indicated that we could always change that to a full membership at any point. Is that correct?
Yes, and then I would just note that if you pay the affiliate fee now, that's just an investment in your future, because the way the JPA was written, cities that joined after the initial joining period, which was the first 6 months after the JPA was executed, would, in addition to owing the fee to become a member in whatever year they were joining, would owe the affiliate fee for the years that they were not a member. So you're basically just making a down payment to becoming a full member later on.
So I take that it's a better deal than I even thought before, right?
Yes.
Okay. Whatever that was, yes, it sounded good. Okay, thank you. Nothing further, Mayor Yu.
Thank you. Councilmember Mint.
Thank you, Mayor Yu. I do have one more question just to clarify. I think, Mr. Cook, you mentioned that if we did join, you mentioned if we budgeted for fiscal year 21-22, that PLHA funds essentially we could use that for the affiliate membership. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And I guess by association in the future, if we did decide to become a full-time member, we could still use the same funding source to join as well.
Yeah, for that remaining 4 years of the funding that's currently enabled in the law.
Okay. And so beyond that time period, it still remains to be seen.
We wouldn't know. We would have to assume it probably would be general fund, but I would suspect that something would come up, but yeah, we would have to make that assumption.
Okay. And just out of professional curiosity for Ms. Acevedo, you mentioned the scoring guidelines for projects was based on the state HCD criteria. Is the actual scoring done by HCD or done by the board of directors?
I guess there would be two levels of scoring. So the board of directors would evaluate projects to include in that application to the state. So they would make that recommendation based on what the guidelines are, along with staff and our consultant team. And then the state would also do its own scoring process before awarding any funds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess in summary, I think it's I like the idea. I think it's much needed in the region, and as I think Mr. Cook, you mentioned, affordable housing, homelessness, they're all intricately tied together. It is true, no issue. Now, how the state handles that in relation to, how we do our housing elements and all that great stuff year by year. I guess I'm hoping that at some point that philosophy or that policy would evolve and shift away, focusing on city by city, because not all cities are created equal in terms of land value, open space, opportunities for development, for affordable housing. It's just like you can't even compare us to some of our, like, you put us next to LA, and it's just like apples when it comes to land use, space, and development opportunities. So I think it's a good idea to join as an affiliate. I would certainly concur with staff's recommendation for that, and hopefully, as being a part of this trust, I'm thinking more where we gain a lot of access to this resources in terms of knowledge. How does it work? How our policy is changing at the state. How does that kind of trickle down and impact us directly? And while we may not have obvious affordable housing opportunities right now in front of us, that could always change. And so I think being a part of that allows us to make that transition, should those opportunities ever come up, and then we can try to integrate that into the pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Councilmember Vizcarra. Final question or comment?
Yeah, one thing I wasn't clear on, that if we went for a full membership at a later date, we'd have a retroactive amount due because we applied late for our affiliate membership.
Not because you applied late for affiliate membership. The JPA was written so that there was no joining fee if you joined within the first 6 months. And so that period ended last year. And it was written so that cities that joined after that period would pay the affiliate fee for years in which they were not members. So at this point, there would only be one year of operations if you were to join as a full member.
So conceptually, if we joined in 3 years, it'd be 3 years, right?
3 years of that, yes, $3,000 affiliate.
That's fine. Okay. I hear you all saying that we need to have a regional perspective on this, and that sounds like it's the right thing to do. So I'll support that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't know how many remember this, but this is one of Susan Rubio's very first legislation bills that went into place that, or I don't want to say a bill, but that she worked with in forming. So I think just in the sense that she's been very supportive of Temple City, and this was pretty much something that came from her, and she worked closely. I worked closely with her when the trust was first a thought, and it was actually, she came out to one of our, I believe it was a Lunar New Year event a couple of years ago, and she said, what do you think about this? And there was just early discussions on it, and I know how passionate she was about it. So I think just in supporting something that she feels so passionate about it could only help continue to build those relationships with our state senator. But I know she keeps a real close watch on this, Brielle, because it is something that she is working so hard on getting more funding for the trust. And I think having the support from her San Gabriel Valley cities in her district can only help regionally, because the more support, the more she can ask for as far as monetary monies go from the state legislature. So I think it's something that we should do.
Right, thank you. Well, actually, I'm still kind of confused as to what this affiliated membership would do for us. Because I think my interest really, well, I guess being a member, we as a city that support a regional solution to bring affordable housing. So I think that might be a good enough reason for that. But as far as the affiliated membership, that doesn't get us any, from what I'm reading here, it doesn't allow us to get access to available funding source. I'm less concerned about having a seat on the board of directors. I'm just more concerned, well, that doesn't really help us in getting available funding. And it's not just $3,000. From what I'm reading here, it's $6,000 for the first year, $3,000 joining fee, and annual administrative fee of $3,000. So that's $6,000, but doesn't really get us to any access to funding. So so maybe along that line, a quick question for Mr. Cook. The permanent local housing allocation, if we don't spend it on affiliated membership, we are spending it on helping affordable housing, or where are we spending it on right now?
Yes, Mary, right now, a few months ago, we had the discussion about the fact that there wasn't enough funding, as Ms. Azevedo pointed out with like the city of Claremont, there wasn't enough funding to do an affordable housing project, but it was eligible funding for home improvements for people who demonstrated they were either could lose that housing or met income thresholds for that housing, similar to CDBG in a lot of ways. So that's where that funding is going for this year. Funding would go, we would, assuming that program is going well and there's enough subscription to it, we would probably bring that back to you again. But for the next year's budget, 21-22, we would include, if the council is so inclined tonight, we would have the membership as a line item as well, which is that eligible cost.
But would I be correct to say that if we pay $6,000 as the affiliated membership this year in 21-22, that means it's $6,000 less that we have for folks to fix up their homes?
If we assume that that's the council's inclination to continue to fund the program that way, that would be $6,000 less for that program. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's my comment and question. So I guess at this time, we're ready for a council motion to provide direction whether or not we should become a member. Anybody?
I'll make a motion to join the Housing Trust as an affiliate member. I don't have the full thing up. If somebody else has it.
I
That's
guess,
sufficient enough, Melissa.
Is that enough, Brian?
I think so, Mr.
Well,
Murphy.
Yes.
you indicate affiliated membership, right? Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
I would second that motion.
It's moved and
Chavez.
seconded. Madam Clerk, roll call vote, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Chavez,
Yes.
Councilmember Mann,
Yes.
Councilmember Viscara,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist,
Yes.
Mayor Yu.
Yes. So the motion carried. So, I guess that's enough direction, Mr. Cook.
Yes,
Right.
and Ms. Acevedo and Ms. Chan and I will work and we'll get everything rolling.
Thank you, Bria.
Well, thank you, Ms. Azevedo, for coming tonight. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. Okay. Moving on to the next item, update from Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Yu. I'll be honest, I'm fading a little bit with my shot this afternoon, but I'll get through. Couple quick updates. Speaking of CDBG, the grant program that for small businesses, by the end of the month, we'll get through a vast majority of about the 17 businesses that were in the first tier. In the last day or so, one of them has been funded. So hopefully in the next few weeks, the remaining will be funded. We'll get you a full report later as to how things are going. So staff has done an excellent job of taking that on themselves and moving that ball forward. The San Gabriel Valley Economic Partnership, which I'm the city manager's representative to, couple quick things. One, they did do their economic forecast with Robert Kleinhans. You may have heard Dr. Kleinhans on KNX News and a few other regional outlets. His forecast with his group is a mild but still robust recovery starting in the next few months, especially in the summer in the San Gabriel Valley. Two areas that have been pointed out is a robust residential market that does not seem to be slowing down, which is good for us as a property tax-based city. The other issue though is office space, and one of the things that we didn't go through with Mr. Goodell, but the office space vacancy rates are starting to creep up significantly in parts of the San Gabriel Valley. Logistics is the other growth industry in the San Gabriel Valley as well. So lease rates and occupancy rates for logistics is quite high, but he sees a moderate, not the same, and somewhat uneven growth throughout the Los Angeles region. A little bit slower in the San Gabriel Valley, but still recovering from the recession. And technically, from his analysis, we've been out of the recession for several months. The other thing the Economic Partnership will be doing too is looking at, and as they have shifted, at economic development type of assistance to cities. Usually that was involved with the economic Los Angeles County Economic Development Board, and they have staff that is started to wind down a little bit. So the partnership is looking at a little bit more robust programming on that front. And I'll bring that back to you when that's truly fleshed out. The stimulus package, the most recent package that was passed, the $1.9 billion, there's two forms of allocation. There's one to entitlement cities. Those are usually cities that receive direct funding from the federal government, and non-entitlement cities like the city of Temple City. We are allocated to receive, or eligible to receive, a little over $6 million. The guidelines from the state of California or any other entity has not been presented to us, but we as staff and Ms. Pagras has put together some preliminary numbers, which we'll share with you at a future meeting, of what we think we can get from reimbursements from lost revenue since fiscal year 18-19 and direct COVID-related costs that we've incurred in the last year. There was a mention of the housing pods. That is a project that's actually not in Temple City or even Temple City adjacent. It's outside of the city. It's on, if you head down Las Tunas for quite a while, way past, it's near and around the unincorporated parts bordering El Monte and Arcadia. So if there's a concern that there's a project that's bordering Temple City, it's not. And then the governor announced today some movement away from the tier system if certain metrics are met related to the restrictions. So we are still moving ahead with our, gradual but consistent way of that we've been dealing with this pandemic with staff and services. Hopefully too, with the rollout of the vaccine over the next 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, we'll start to see those numbers decline. Restaurants in the region, in our area, have done very well. Driving around the city today as well, you can see many of our restaurants have survived this event by the skin of their teeth, I'm sure in some cases, but they are surviving, and they are an economic engine for the city of Temple City. They represent around 35% of our sales tax base. So their losses have been significant. So when we come back to you for our third quarter budget review, you're going to see a little bit of a decline in sales tax and some other receipts. And we'll come to you as well. Next year's 2021 budget on the general fund side is going to be very tough. But again, it is stable because of our property tax base. That's it for me, Mary Yu. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for hanging with us in spite of the second COVID shot, Mr. Cook.
Hopefully,
update from,
hopefully it was coherent.
Get your ibuprofen.
You're taking
Yeah.
your Tylenol like I told you.
Well, next item is update from Mr. City Manager, Mr. Murphy.
No long update tonight, Mr. Mayor, just with the governor's report today that he's aiming for a June 15th wide reopening. Obviously, there's a lot that's going to go into that, and we'll be monitoring what the state is pushing, what they're requiring, and what they're allowing. Obviously, a lot of that will be Ms. Sutorp of my office dealing with Ms. Pargas on employment issues, but there also may be, an additional set of issues on how we need to deal with businesses within the city. So we'll keep a close eye on that, just as we did last year at this time when everything was shutting down, and we'll keep updating you as we go along. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Next item is council report regarding ad hoc or standing committee meetings. Are there any reports from ad hoc or standing meetings?
Mayor, for the city commissioner recruitment ad hoc committee that council member Viscara and I are part of, I think in our discussion with our city clerk, we're recommending to the full city council that we appoint our incumbent commissioner without opening citywide recruitment, which, if Ms. Kuo, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the we took last year as well.
That's correct.
And also, I think to our understanding, all of our incumbent commissioners have reapplied.
They've expressed interest to reapply for another term. That's also correct.
Okay. And so we recognize ultimately that is still at the discretion of the council. So that's the recommendation from the ad hoc.
Well, thank you, Councilman.
I have a question, Mayor Yu.
Yeah.
So last year we did it, of course, because of the pandemic and the difficulty and really we didn't have a great understanding at the time of how we would do things, or with the social distancing. That seems to be more relaxed every day, and based on what Mr. Murphy just got through telling us, the governor is seeking to basically reopen everything in June of this year. Are those same reasons present where we would not at least publish, see what kind of interest we have in other people? Because then that would be 2 years in a row without anyone having the opportunity, if they wanted, to serve on a commission. I think, yeah, I'm a little concerned about that length of time.
Yeah, certainly. That's as I mentioned, that is ultimately council's discretion. If council chooses to open up recruitment citywide due to the reasons you have stated, then that's certainly something. So what I guess I have a question. I don't know for Mr. City or City Clerk. I know this is part of the reporting out, but is that something you need like the council to deliberate on, or can it be done under the current forum now?
I would say that this definitely, you've given a report. Councilmember Chavez has sort of given a different idea. In light of that, I think this needs to be agendized for a discussion because what's agendized tonight really is your report. So with that question, I would think, and I see the mayor nodding, we'll have Mr. Cook agendize this for the next meeting so that you can discuss which way you'd like to go. And then as you said, sir, if the council's direction is to, have a full process, then the ad hoc would continue. If the council accepts the current recommendation, then the ad hoc would, by the acceptance of that recommendation, I guess, pulled up at that time. But we can deal with that at our next meeting, I believe.
And I only bring that up. I have no problem, of course, with the current commissioners, and I'm sure each of them are and I've always been a proponent that, they've got the experience, and why change unless there's a compelling reason to do so. But I'm just concerned that it may be sending the wrong message, given the fact that we are at least have every indication moving out of the extreme COVID situation, and would give us the opportunity at least to gauge what the interest is out there in the public. And we do seem to have some time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the terms end at the end of June. Is that correct? Or is it earlier than that?
No, that's right.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we have a couple of months still to mess with this, I think. So.
Yeah, and also if add I think one other perspective, this was made 3 years ago when I can't remember who else was on the ad hoc with me. It might have been former Councilmember Fish. We did go through one cycle where we had all the incumbent commissioners reply. We opened it up for wide recruitment. Council ended up, through the interview process, reappointing the incumbent commissioners. And I do recall receiving some feedback from the other interviewers who said, well, if you're going to appoint the incumbents, why did you bother opening up for full recruitment? Kind of like the whole idea of giving someone false hope that they were going to get appointed. But yeah, I could see your reason. So I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Well, I think
Okay.
you're going to have people unhappy on both sides, I think, at all times. So I think
So this is not really agendized for discussion. I think we better, thank you for the report, Councilmember Min and Councilmember Vizcarra, and pay the comment, Councilmember Chavez. We'll agendize this for future discussion. Maybe next meeting, I guess, so that we give enough time for recruitment.
Good.
All right, thank you. Any other report from standing committees on ad hoc committees? I guess that's the only one. Okay, moving on to the next item, council items separate from the city manager's regular agenda. Councilmember Chavez.
hey, thank you, Mary Yu. Just want to give a shout out to Athens. Was it last 2 weeks ago or Sunday? As you may know, we had the long overdue Athens compost event. Combine that with having a booth there to answer questions and address concerns of residents regarding the changeover to the automated bins. And while I was there, it appeared nothing but a large success. As far as the compost giveaway, I think it may have been reported that the line at the peak hours snaked around down Baldwin Avenue, past Olive, up to Danes, all the way down Danes, up the street besides the rest home and into the northern parking lot. And it was quite a long line to pick up some compost, but it was amazing. People were very considerate. Everybody seemed to be, following the rules, and I didn't see any hitches, to be honest with you. The booth, Athens had a number of employees there. Ed Chen was there, of course, with others who answered questions. They had the trash cans there, or the bins there for people to see. And actually, most of the people that were up asking questions, at least while I was there, were most favorable and in support of the changeover. So I think it was a good thing. They were also passing out flyers and written information to those who wanted it. So otherwise a good event. Well, thank you, Athens, for doing that, and also staff. I know Brian Arizumi and his staff did a great job, and the sheriffs did as well, as far as traffic was concerned. And then real briefly, kind of off what I just mentioned about the commissioners, even though, things are seem to be opening up and people are trying to return to what we refer to as a normalcy. I'm a little concerned, and I just want to make sure that people understand that the virus is still out there, and people are still getting sick, and people still have to follow the protocols. My concern, as it always has been, and this is no reflection, I think, on our city staff, but who is policing these restrictions or lack of restrictions? I know I went and picked up some dinner at a restaurant on Sunday, and I know on Sunday it was still, I believe, 25%. It didn't go to 50% until Monday. This restaurant was packed. I mean, packed. No one had a mask on. And when I asked the guy at the counter, a young man, probably in his late teens, early 20s, hey, what's going on here? He said, oh, well, most people are getting their shots, so we feel pretty comfortable about it. Which to me is sending the wrong message. I mean,
Is that here?
No, the restaurant wasn't in Temple City, no. But it's everywhere. I mean, I leave Pasadena and I'm driving back home. The restaurants are packed. I mean, there are people all over the place. I mean, in Old Town Pasadena, it's like 2019 again. And I understand that, and I know the concern that people are really dying to get out there and really want to, get back to what they feel was normal times. But I think we still need to be a little bit cautious, I think, and hopefully people will take that to heart so that we can get over this once and for all. Because if you listen to the experts, it's still not over. And I wish, even being a politician, I think people need to listen more to the doctors and the experts than the politicians on this issue. But that's always been our problem, it seems like. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you, Mayor Yu.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Min.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to say. I just want to give a shout out to our law enforcement team, our monthly meeting. I do want to mention that as we discussed in that meeting, I am looking forward to us having the neighborhood watch meetings again, virtually, of course, and hopefully we can get that back online on a consistent basis. And it would also be interesting to see as we make progress as a region, at what point do we as a city start having in-person events, albeit social distancing? I think that's, like Councilmember Chavez says, everyone's kind of excited to try to do some sense of normalcy resembling the pandemic, but a lot of precautions, and I think we still need to go by the data, go by science to make that decision. But for as an agency, we need to plan ahead as well. I don't think this. I mean, virtual is probably going to be here to stay in some shape or form. But how do we bring back the spirit of a lot of our, made our city special, our events for our residents and constituents? How do we transition back slowly to that? I'd be interested to see how we approach. And just on a personal note, I'm getting my second shot tomorrow, so I don't know how I'll feel though. I've heard a lot of different reactions from a lot of different people. I mean, what during after, I actually don't know anyone who got the Johnson.
Which one are you getting?
Pfizer. Yeah. And I guess apparently the Pfizer shot has a shorter window between the first and the second shot compared to the other one. So I got my first shot 3 weeks ago, and they had already for tomorrow. So, but yeah, I hope if as the vaccine eligibility has expanded to a lot of people now that for opportunities to protect themselves and their family. And like Tom said, we still got to be careful. Just because you got the vaccine doesn't mean you can't transmit it. That's the scary part, right? You could still carry it, and you could still transmit it to someone else, and God forbid you infect someone who wasn't able to get the vaccine yet. Anyway, that's
Thank you. Good luck with your shot. Maybe not tomorrow, but maybe Friday. Maybe you feel something. Yes, I don't know. Councilmember Vizcarra, any items?
I would just like to comment on Councilmember Chavez's remarks. In the past week, we have eaten out at least 7 times, maybe 8, including lunch today, and I had to meet with my contractor and all his employees. Everybody was masked. The only place I saw that people were not masking was at the beach. They seem to think that somehow they're immune out there, the fresh air is going to take the virus away. But other than that, I've been pretty impressed. And I've eaten twice in Pasadena, and those people were adhering to the masking and distancing. So I'll just say that. So I'm happy for that. I'm glad that is happening. Other than that, that's it.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Sternquist, any items?
I know William mentioned that we should, start to prepare for some return to normalcy and some events. I spoke to Brian about this a week ago, and he said that staff is going to be looking into it about possibly having a shorter, maybe a possible 6-week concerts in the park with some type of social distancing, and maybe start in mid-August and go through September for just 6 concerts, and possibly do the planning now for that. And if we're able to move forward with it, because things are, opened up even more, that staff could work on ways to be able to do that. But I think it would be really great for us to be able to do even just a 6-week instead of our full 12-week concerts in the park. And if it had to be even, less than that, but something that we could do for the community that I think everybody enjoys. And Brian had mentioned that they were already talking about possibly doing it at Live Oak Park, because there's, it's such a larger space where you can social distance more, and maybe families can sit together with friends in a pod or whomever they feel comfortable with. So I think there's ways that we can at least start to look towards the end of this pandemic and still be safe. I've gotten just some frequent messages on iMessenger and regarding questions still about has the city relaxed parking yet? And I was thinking that, I mean, not relaxed, but is enforcing the parking fines again for violations. And I was thinking that maybe we should start with maybe the governor's date and use May to actually educate the public that we're going to transition back. So if we could maybe put that on the agenda, Brian, so that we as a council can talk about that and how we'd like to move forward with that. But I think that should probably be in the back of our minds that at some point we're going to need to do that. And it's going to take some time to have the public transition back into having fines again without everybody just going bonkers and you having a lot of staff, a lot of phone calls about it. Let's see, was there anything else? Oh, just wanted to see if we could kind of get an update of what the traffic study on the Primrose and where the rollover violation was. I mean, the accident was not too long ago, Brian.
Yeah, we have completed that study, and I'll provide it as part of my city manager. I'll have Mr. Arizumi provide it during the city manager's report at the next meeting.
Okay, and that's pretty much it. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I only have one item just wanted to bring to, well, we really don't have much of a public here, but if they were watching or listening to this recording, they're going to see that we actually have in the consent calendar additional funding for the Primrose Park. But along with that, it's actually, I just want to say that appreciate what the city manager and then Director Matsumoto did and working with the city engineer. They were able to bring down the project deficit from close to $500,000 down to a little over 130,000. And they were able to creatively find some money to cover that. Not that we are going into that extra money, but it's just a good way to allow the project to flow smoothly. But I think the more exciting news is that the contract's been signed, and then we are able to issue the change orders to. So the point is exciting news. So the project's on its way. So that's all I have. With that, I'll move for the next item. Yes.
One quick thing. I'm sorry, Mario. You just reminded me about the consent calendar item. I just need to double check one thing, but you can go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Okay. So on the additional public, next item is additional public comment. And Madam Clerk, I guess I don't see any called in. Do you have any emails?
There are no email requests or email comments.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close public comment. Mr. Cook, do you have anything that you need to add? You said you
No,
could...
sir. It was just on the consent calendar was a Primrose item, and Councilmember Sternquist wasn't available during that vote, so that was fine. So
okay, yeah.
The record will reflect that she left the meeting and she came back. Is that accurate, City Clerk?
That's correct.
Okay, we just wanted to make sure that's what we thought we covered, but thank you for indulging me.
All right, thank you. Now with that, we are adjourned for the night. Thank you so much for everything. So everybody stay safe.
Have a good night.
Mr. Mayor, good meeting.